Well, that wasn't what you wanted. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you, Sunday evening, April 6th, 2025. Cardinals swept over the weekend at Boston, and two of the L's coming on Sunday after the Cardinals go into Game 1, the ninth inning, with a 4-2 lead, and find a way to lose that game, and Game 2 was never close, as Miles Mikolas got hit around. I put the stats there on the thumbnail image for this video. 2 2/3, 11 hits, 9 runs. Only 8 of them earned. There's the upside, I suppose. Yeah, we got to talk about it tonight. Miles Mikolas was rough, and really all weekend long, you got some disappointment from the pitching staff of the St. Louis Cardinals. The starting pitching, well, you got Palante. He was okay. But otherwise, you got firebombed Eric Fetty and firebombed Miles Mikolas. Oh, boy. I mean, it's not sustainable, gang. That's the one thing that we know off the top. The Cardinals, for as good as they're hitting, man, I don't think that even this lineup producing the way that it is going to be able to sustain a winning record with the way that the pitching staff is performing. And it wasn't just the starters. 2 of the 3 starters over the weekend got rocked, but man, Ryan Helsley, that was an unfortunate time for him to have the first blip on his radar of 2025. Just couldn't command his pitches, and that's the fastball and the slider, to be honest. It was really both that were giving him trouble. And at times in the past, we've seen Ryan Helsley not have his fastball command, but find a way to get by on his ridiculously good slider. But when he couldn't locate that either, it meant trouble for the Cardinals in Game 1 as they squandered that 4-2 lead. Credit to Helsley for getting out of the jam with the game still existing. Could have ended right there and given the Cardinals the L before extra innings, but did at least get it to extras. But the Cardinals couldn't score. I mean, you gotta be able to score a run. Runner on second base, nobody out. That's the scene, and they couldn't find a way to score. But the offensive issues are far from the top of the list. And really, there aren't many offensive issues to talk about. I did feel in the moment that it was not a great play for Brendan Donovan to, in Game 1, run into the out at second base. That was in the top of the ninth inning when the Cardinals had that 4-2 lead. You're feeling good about it. They could have potentially tacked on more, and it would have been first and third, 2 outs, and makes the last out there at second, trying to stretch on a ball hit into right field, the base hit into a double. I just didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze on that one, and, I guess you could say it came back to haunt the Cardinals. But again, 4 walks by Ryan Helsley. That's what we're talking about. We can do this all day long, and I think we will, probably all summer long, every time that there's a moment like that where the Cardinals lose in spectacular fashion. It's going to be somebody's fault, right? And there's going to be the desire from the public to look at Ollie Marmol and say, well, what did you do wrong in this situation? And it's people who know me, who have listened to my content, understand I'm always going to try to contextualize it. And the context for this one is, all right, why didn't he take Ryan Helsley out sooner? It was clear he didn't have it. And at a certain point, it felt I was sitting on my couch convinced he didn't have it too. And I was going, are we going to show a shot of anybody in the bullpen? Anybody warming up there? But the reality is he did kind of find it back there for a minute and was ultimately 1 strike away from getting out of it, which kind of just proves the theory. And I know it didn't work out and they lose the game. And ultimately he did end the inning. Like, it's not like the game ended right then and there. That was a horrific inning, though, by Helsley. And he'd be the first to tell you. He just flat out couldn't command his pitches. But I think he's a level of player that you're just going to let him ride through it. And I know that that's not going to be an answer that people are satisfied by. It's very similar, though, to me. And again, I'm not covering this series. I'm not on the road, so I don't know if, what Ollie Marmol has had to say about this to media and stuff. It feels like the other day when Mason Wynn didn't get lifted for Nolan Gorman as a pinch hitter. And I don't think Gorman was hurt yet. I don't know really when that injury happened with him. That could have been part of the reason if he was already sort of dealing with something that there wasn't a move made there. But I feel like Gorman played a game since that moment happened. But I'm not going to bother going back to look right now. We've got too many details to get into on tonight's show. And by the way, hit subscribe on this channel if you are interested in Cardinals content all summer long. If If you want to support the work we do, check out the video description where you can sign up for the YouTube membership. Shout out, by the way, to Jim, who rejoined the membership just a few days ago, and I always try to do a better job of shouting out our members. Really do appreciate your guys' support. But anyhow, I'm not going back to figure out the game log for Nolan Gorman on this. My point is, Mason Wynn is the caliber of player for Oliver Marmol that he's going to ride through a moment of weakness or a stretch where it looks like he's down and out because he has the long game in mind. He has a long-term vision and knows what Mason Wynn is to this Cardinals team. And so when Ollie Marmol's answer was, that's Mason's at bat, and like kind of left it at that, it was pretty clear that that was Mason's at bat, and that's the way the Cardinals view that player. Ryan Helsley, certainly with even more of a veteran pedigree, is viewed in that light by Cardinal management, by Oliver Marmol. And ultimately, we were very close to having it play out within that very moment that when all seemed lost, Ryan Helsley was still a strike away. At the end of it all, was able to get one key out and was close to another one. And then whatever little confidence boost he had found, it seemed to dissipate. And so I'm talking about the 0-2 to Devers. You get into an 0-2 count. Spiked a slider, which I love the call there from Pages. And we'll have to talk to about Pages being in that game late because Ivan Herrera is heading to the injured list, which is a huge blow to the Cardinals. But hopefully if the news from later on Sunday night ends up being accurate, not a long-term blow to the extent that it could have been when you were watching him gingerly leave the field under the power of two of his staff and coaches, with the trainer and the coaches out there helping him off the field. But anyhow, Pages ends up in that game for the fateful inning, and I had mentioned that I liked going to the slider on 0-2, spiked it, Devers didn't bite, okay. From there, you would have probably thought to go back fastball, but they played around a little bit with the slider still, and that's where he kind of lost. Helsley lost location on it seemed like, and then I think there was a 99 fastball mixed in there. Everything was away, was kind of missing arm side. And so that's where I say whatever confidence he had built up, that sequence sort of seemed to backtrack on him a little bit there, and obviously the Red Sox end up tying the game. But at the end of the day, he battled through to get one strikeout and was close enough to another one that it wasn't a move that I was overly questioning, understanding that very similar to the way that the Mason Wynn situation had been handled a number of days ago, that's the way that you're going to handle that situation. Ryan Helsley's in a game. He's not usually leaving it, barring injury. And I think it's unrealistic when fans will think, well, I mean, he blew it. 4 walks. Yeah, that's a ton of walks. I hear you. But you're also looking at a phenomenon from the first week and a half of the Cardinals season where the rest of the bullpen isn't the same as it was last year. You're not getting the same level of production from those other guys either. And like, whereas last year, Ryan Fernandez would have been a guy that you really trust to hand the reins to in those tight spots. And he answered the bell, especially by, mid-season. You got a feel for what he was about and could be used in some more of those leverage spots. And right now he's walking a guy every time he appears in a game, and the command is just not quite there. Doesn't mean he's not going to turn things around, but at the moment, it's not like there's a bunch of other options to say, get Helsley out of there, you throw this guy. Well, whoever you're throwing isn't as good as Ryan Helsley. Now, if you were just convinced gut feel that he wasn't going to find the strike zone at any point in that outing, then you maybe would have wanted to see Ollie Marmol make a move. But if you had felt that way, you would have been wrong, at least for a portion of it, because he did find the strike zone briefly and then sort of lost it. So it is what it is. Just a really hard way to lose that first game when you got some good starting pitching. Palante, did his job, I would say, in that first game. And then to lose it in a demoralizing way and to know that then there's one more game remaining on the day, and it's one that if you don't win it, you've been swept in Boston. And then it goes the way that it goes with Miles Mikolas. Tough one for the Cardinals as they drop 18-7 in the nightcap, and they're now below 500. So as quick as they started hot with a 3-0 record, they're now sitting at 4-5. They've lost 5 of their last 6, and they're heading to Pittsburgh on Monday to try to turn things back around. And all the while, the Cubs are kind of finding their level a little bit. And look, I think the Cubs are going to be a pretty good team this year. I mean, they look like they've got a lot to be excited about, and perhaps the 0-2 start happened only because they were playing the Dodgers, and the Dodgers may not lose to very many teams all year. Although the Dodgers, as we speak, are in second place in their division. The Giants, I don't even think I quite realized how good the Giants had started this season. They're 8-1, so good for them. But where the Cardinals fit into all of this in the National League right now, they're currently 4-5, and a game and a half back of the Cubs, a half game back of the Brewers, who have settled things in as a 500 team for the moment. Reds are 3-7, Pirates are 3-7, and the Cardinals get a chance to go to that 3-7 Pirates team tomorrow, Monday, by the time you're listening to this. What do they do about Miles Mikolas, I think, is a big topic of conversation, because we did a Sports Hub STL postgame show. A lot of people talking about that. A lot of people on Twitter. That was a big topic of conversation as to how the Cardinals handle it after a game like this one. 11 hits allowed, 9 runs allowed. Mikolas sees his ERA spike to 11.25. Now, that's only in 2 appearances, 8 innings, so it's not a super large sample size, but he was a 5.35 ERA last year in a sample size that was pretty big, 171 innings. And I just look at the way things are trending, and I'm skeptical as to whether Miles Mikolas is going to be able to turn it around. Will he be given the opportunity to by the Cardinals? And the way that a lot of fans would phrase it is, should he be given that opportunity? Of course, in the final year of his contract, I think that does change the dynamic here relative to what it would have been in past years, where the Cardinals are in that transition year, whatever that may mean to you. Your mileage may vary, but at the end of the day, Miles Mikolas is not going to be on this team in 2026, and so you could turn toward viewing his situation as a sunk cost at a certain point. I understand that most Cardinals fans want that point to be now. There was a lot of conversation on Twitter. I saw Derek Gould getting in the mix regarding the DFA crowd and folks requesting that the Cardinals do that with Miles Mikolas. Then maybe the notion that DFA is actually not the correct terminology for that. Cardinals fans want Miles Mikolas to be off the team. That's the bottom line. I think for right now, they're in an interesting spot, because as much as you've got Michael McGreevy waiting in the wings, and I think he's somebody that should be on this team sooner than later, you do want to be able to get through April. And I know that that's not going to be a popular kind of sentiment, but the injuries that have been happening the last couple of days on the position player side could happen on the pitching side. And I've used the phrase, look a gift horse in the mouth. If you say, hey, we don't need Miles Mikolas around here, we've got these other guys, that could end up working out just fine. And those other guys, if it's Michael McGreevy, could end up being ready. I think he is, and he can end up doing a nice job. And so you'd say, well, that's as simple as it gets. Why wouldn't you go ahead and make that move? I think because you know that the injury bug can hit, and we have seen Miles Mikolas have success in the past. The problem is right now, like, he had one pretty good start to begin the season, but even in that game, when you just, the way I frame it is like there's nothing deceptive about what Miles Mikolas is doing in 2025. I think that batters see it so well, they see what's coming so well, that you know they are putting a bat on it. It's very difficult for him to miss bats at this point. And even some of the pitches that he was giving hits up on tonight against the Red Sox were below the zone. I mean, some of them weren't even strikes, but it just looks so delectable to hitters. I don't know why, but it looks like it's happening in slow motion sometimes. His delivery is such that there's not a lot of deceptiveness to it. I think batters are seeing the ball well out of his hand, and I think it's he could even hit his spots at times, and it's still not enough. You're going to need a batter to get himself out. So that's a little bit difficult to believe is going to be something that you can sustain. And tonight we saw the very low end of the spectrum on what that looks like, where they were beating him up, and batted balls find holes. At times he's going to have to be, and I've talked about this with respect to the defense, a pitch to contact pitcher, and so you're going to want to make sure you have the best defense possible behind him. But at times, balls are going to find holes, and I've felt this way going back to last year with Mikolas. At times, it's not that every ball is a home run. Like, this notion that soft contact is a reason to maybe be encouraged and say, well, if there's some contact that's not as hard, then maybe next time those balls won't find holes. I find that the BABIP concerns and the balls finding holes against Miles Mikolas when they're put in play, I don't feel like that's something that's going away, because it feels like batters can almost place it in the field. They can place it where they want it, because it's all sort of happening in slow motion. So even if they're not hitting homers off of him, it feels like they can have that good piece of hitting the other way, because it's as though, or whether it's the other way or not the other way, it doesn't really make a difference. It's as though time kind of slows down, because I just don't think there's a lot of deceptiveness to what he's doing. It doesn't mean he can't find success again for the Cardinals. And I think, again, my conversation about you want to get through April and kind of see where you're at. And I don't know if it's April. I don't know if it's mid-May. I wouldn't really wait longer than that. And I don't think the Cardinals will. If the ERA is 11.5, I don't think you'll continue to see Mikolas for very much longer. I'm cool with the Cardinals giving him another start. I'm cool with the Cardinals giving him April, But I think these are things that they ought to be thinking about more so than they would have in past years when the contract wasn't coming up. Yes, they're paying him regardless, and they're paying him a lot of money, but this is the point in time where maybe the money starts to be less of a hindrance, because it is what it is. The money's a fact of life. But if you have a Michael McGreevy that is ready, and I believe he had a pretty good start his last time in Memphis after a rough one to begin the season, then at a certain point you do say, okay, are we stable here with our pitching depth? Let's make this move and, find something closer to replacement value for Miles Mikolas and hope that that's Michael McGreevy. Obviously they do. But for right now, we're still waiting as I record this on the second start of the season for Matthew Liberatore. What does he look like the second time through? We know that his consistency when he's been in a starting role the last couple of years has not been super high, and I do think you're getting a better version of him now than you ever have. But we have to be able to see that sustained moving forward to have some confidence of, okay, yeah, right now he's in the rotation, but he's also going to remain there, and you can feel good and confident in that. A guy like Palante, I think he's going to be in that rotation. I don't think he's going to flame out of it, but he's another guy that's going to have to rely on good quality defense behind him. Fedde, I still think is going to fare a lot better than he did on Friday in Boston, but certainly that was not a very productive start for him. And so it's one thing to not pitch well and to have a higher ERA. It's another to not be able to get very deep in games when you're starting a new series, and then the bullpen has to sort of wear that. And Steven Matz, in theory, won't be there in your bullpen forever if he's going to be rejoining the rotation. And this notion that it's going to be a six-man is, I don't see it working with the way that we have seen the bullpen perform. How you juggle, and maybe it's just as simple as continuing to churn through the Memphis shuttle and get as many arms through as you can to keep healthy and fresh ones available. But if you have a starting rotation, and this is why the Cardinals have never done it, they've resisted the six-man rotation urge, if there's been an urge at various points in recent years, because the math on it is very difficult. When you have six starters and a number of them aren't consistently getting you, 5 is the minimum. You've got to really be able to have guys that can get you 6+ consistently, because the first moment somebody doesn't, you see the impact on the bullpen. Today, fortunately, it was a doubleheader. I guess I say fortunately. If it wasn't a doubleheader, it wouldn't have been as difficult to craft a pitching plan. But you do have a long relief option that they bring up as the 27th man. That was Graceffo. He got beat to hell. But he still chewed up 3 of those innings that you just had to have it from him. You had to throw him out there even though he was struggling. You just didn't have any other choice because of what it does to the bullpen. And they're not even in the 6-man rotation yet, right? They haven't started that. So the idea that you've got, sometimes, Russian roulette, every 4th start, every 5th start, whatever it's going to be, Mikolas isn't going to get through the 3rd, or Fedde's not going to get through the 4th. And if that's just baked into it, and Sonny is, I think, going to be more than fine, but he's not exactly a guy that's going to go 7 every time. When he's hyper efficient, you'll see him breeze, and those days will come. And it kind of did in his last start. He got 6, but then out for the 7th, and he hit that wall. So you're looking up and down this rotation. Liberatore is kind of known for being the guy that he'll get once through the lineup, and then things start to slow down a little bit. Credit to him in his last start for being able to bounce it back and get through 6. But this rotation, I think, is tricky if you're going to say, all right, Steven Matz, instead of being one of those guys that can sit out there in our bullpen and just, come up with the 3-4 innings when we need him at random, whenever that's going to be, he's in the rotation too as a guy who doesn't go particularly deep. I don't see it working. I do not see with this current iteration it working, and that's fine because I don't necessarily believe them when they say they're going to do it. I think that's the right thing to say until April 16th, until they kind of see where they are. What does that mean for Mikolas? What does it mean for some of these other guys? They're going to run out of pitching if they don't get the consistency from that rotation. And the bullpen has not been as effective. We talk about an overworked bullpen even more than lacking effectiveness. That was the case at times last year when it felt like the same three guys were always pitching. You do need all 8 guys out there, but if you have a 6-man rotation, you only end up with 7. I'm just sort of talking through this and thinking through this and going, I just don't know if it's ultimately going to be realistic for the Cardinals to do it unless they get consistency from those 6, and that would be the incentive to do it. Right now, it kind of feels like, well, Steven Matz is the obvious guy who had a good spring, and it's not really fair to him to say, hey, you had a good spring and you're not in the rotation, so we're going to add you into it at some point. And again, I think that's kicking the can down the road because they had to have all the guys in the rotation that are in there if they want to prioritize Liberatore for 2025 and 2026 and beyond, because he's going to be on the team next year. Steven Matz isn't. We've talked about this. Then having him in the rotation was 100% the right decision. It came at Steven Matz's expense, but by saying it's only a short-term expense, you're going to be in the rotation soon, we promise, it ends up kind of assuaging some of the whatever, fears, concerns, malcontentment that Steven Matz may have about the situation. And I believe them. I don't think they're lying to Steven Matz. I think they're going to put him in the rotation. I just don't know exactly how you, in reality, manage it as a 6-man without getting some more consistency from the starters that are in the rotation already. And then you look to the bullpen guys, and the churn is going to begin very, very soon, in earnest. I would be very, very surprised if the bullpen that take Graceffo out of it, but the 8 that existed in the bullpen on Sunday, or I guess you would say Saturday, I don't think that'll be the same 8 when you get to the end of the Pittsburgh series. I just don't see any way. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not, but the moves could be coming. Speaking about moves that are coming, let's talk a little bit about the Ivan Herrera thing before we get out of here. The injury looked very, very concerning. Again, when I saw it and he wasn't putting any weight onto that left leg, you're thinking Achilles, you're thinking ACL, you're thinking substantial damage. Everything came back negative according to the reports coming out of Boston, and so that is great news. Oliver Marmol, though, did say, according to, I think it was Katie Wu's report that I saw, that he is going to be on the injured list. According to Katie, he will head back to St. Louis, though he's not looking at a, quote, crazy recovery, said Ollie Marmol. And Herrera was quoted saying, quote, I'll be back soon. So hopefully, this ends up being on the shorter side of long. But at the end of the day, I think the Cardinals have lucked out on what this could have been, because he's been your best hitter, and there was, I think, some real concern that he was going to be out for a long, long period of time. If everything is structurally sound, as it came to with Buster Olney reporting from Ollie Marmol mid-game, there was that conversation on the telecast. Everything came back clean and structurally sound, so hopefully this is more of like a 2-3 week type of vibe and not multiple months. But the Cardinals are going to miss Ivan Herrera for sure. What does it mean in the interim? Well, Joel Pozo will be called up, who is a veteran kind of journeyman catcher, Venezuela native, who has started off pretty hot with Memphis this year, has a 1095 OPS prior to Sunday's action with a couple of home runs and 21 plate appearances. 28 years old, has been around the block for sure, and has some major league experience under his belt with the Texas Rangers back in 2021. Got a cup of coffee with them for 21 games. Had a 690 OPS, so not even altogether, too rough around the edges for that. He was hitting 284 with them, too. So 77 plate appearances, not a ton of opportunity. But I think somebody who, it fits the mold for what this sounds like it's going to be. And that's been reported that Joel Pozo will be the promotion the Cardinals make, as Ivan Herrera is expected to go on the injured list Monday. I think that's right, because I think you don't need to call up Jimmy Crooks. You don't need to call up somebody that's going to command a huge amount of playing time. Pedro Pages is going to take it and go as many days as he can, which may not be Monday, by the way. I mean, he did catch basically 2 games today. But I think you're going to see quite a bit of Pedro Pages, and I think that's a good thing because he's very talented behind the plate, and he's also hitting really well at this point, too. The Cardinals are going to miss the bat of Ivan Herrera, but this does sort of simplify things, right? We came into the season going, how do you get all these bats in the lineup? And a lot of times the problems sort themselves out for better or worse. And right now it's for the worse that you don't have Herrera. And it's for the worse that you don't have Nolan Gorman with those 2 guys on the injured list. Now, Sajacy replacing Gorman is a little bit different than Pozo replacing Herrera. because the JC is going to see playing time. But why wouldn't you want him to after the home run that he hit on Sunday night? Am I right? But it's interesting. Like, it's kind of going to be more a case of, okay, here's our lineup for the most part. Go play. And some of the guys that we were kind of wondering, okay, is everybody going to be able to have a spot? Well, now everybody who's healthy is pretty much going to be able to have a spot. So we'll see what the Cardinals end up doing, and we'll see if they're able to kind of quickly bounce back. This series in Pittsburgh can go south on you quick if you don't find a way to get the first one, because the pitching matchup is to the Cardinals' benefit in the first one, but it's not necessarily going to stay that way for particularly long, because Game 2 is Paul Skeens. Although the Cardinals have done well enough against him, we know what Paul Skeens is about, so that's not going to be easy. I'm going to butcher the name of the Pittsburgh Pirates starter for Monday, Carmen Mudzinski. We'll go with Mudzinski on that whole deal, who had some solid numbers as mostly a reliever last year, but has been into the rotation, kind of stretching him out. 3 2/3 innings in his first outing. He has a 9.8 ERA, so he gave up a handful of runs in that one. And the Cardinals will be sending Liberatore, so that's going to be, we're going to see, what does it look like? Libby's second time through. Excited to look at it. Sonny Gray and Paul Skeens couldn't ask for much of a better pitching matchup between these two teams on Tuesday. And then Wednesday is the early game, 11:35 a.m. Central, Fetty against Mitch Keller. Both those guys have struggled so far this year, but I know that Keller can be a pretty tough customer. So the pitching matchup in the first one is your best shot at it. The Cardinals need Liberatore to give them those 6 innings, another quality start, and I think the Cardinals can get off on the right foot in Pittsburgh. But if they don't, suddenly you're going, all right, that's 6 of 7 that you've lost, and you're going into a Paul Skeens matchup the next day and hoping that Sonny Gray can get you over the hump. It's early, but it's also a spot where, the vibes from that 3-0 start against the Twins have completely evaporated, and you're starting to look ahead going, all right, if you don't kind of lock back in on the pitching side of things here pretty soon, do you lose a little bit of that mustard and the momentum that the lineup had been providing to this group? The lineup is doing some really, really good things even still, and it's one of those deals where I think they're exceeding probably what our median expectation would have been for this lineup, but it also is not contractually required to remain that way. Right now, the Cardinals are second in the league in OPS. The Yankees are torpedo batting their way to a 950 OPS as a team. That's unbelievable, by the way. That's a team-wide OPS that would win an MVP in some years if you were an individual player with that statistic. So pretty crazy. Cardinals, though, at 862 are second in baseball, almost 100 points behind the Yankees, but they're also, even after the beating that the Red Sox gave the Cardinals, St. Louis has a better OPS than the Red Sox by almost 50 points on the season. So the Cardinals are doing some unbelievable things offensively. I don't know if they're going to be a top 2 offense all season long. I bet they'll be a top 10 offense, though. I think I've seen enough, as long as they stay healthy, to believe this is going to be a really productive offense this year. I think Brant Brown is doing great things. I think this lineup and these players are finally kind of coalescing the way that you need to see. It's not going to be enough, though, if this pitching staff can't turn things around. So we'll see what that looks like. Let me know, Cardinals fans, what your thoughts are on the disappointment from the weekend series in Boston. And make sure you stay tuned to the channel for more content coming up through the Pittsburgh series this week. That'll do it for this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Appreciate you guys as always. I'm sure there are topics that I missed, so drop them in the comments below. I'll try to get back to you and address anything that I may have missed in this episode. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.